These words are spoken in the name and the love and the power of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So, for those of you who are in the front, I'd love it if you'd turn around and you would take a look at the light pouring in through the window right now. And it comes to us as a great reminder that this is the light that we are called to. Now, how many of you have seen the cult classic, The Blues Brothers? How many of you have seen this movie, The Blues Brothers? So that means that more Episcopalians have seen The Blues Brothers than have read the Bible. I am all in with The Blues Brothers and spent time in college skipping class so I could go to the noon showing of the Blues Brothers at the local theater where I was in school with my closest friend. And I had an idea when I was in college that was eventually vetoed by my wife, but I wanted to name my first two kids Jake and Elwood. That's a true story. So for many of you, you know this story, but if you haven't seen the movie, the Blues Brothers are two men who grew up in boys in an orphanage, and the movie opens up with Jake Blues getting out of prison and his brother picking him up in an old cop car. This is Dan Aykroyd sitting in the old cop car, those of you who remember the movie so well. John Belushi coming out of prison and getting in the car, and when they get together, the first thing they do is they go to see the Penguin. And the Penguin is the nun who ran the orphanage where the two boys were raised. And they go, these dark-suited, tough guys fitting into these little chair desk things. I mean, the stuff. If you haven't seen this movie, it's a holy calling to go home and watch this movie. And it doesn't go well with the Penguin. Jake cusses, and she says, "You boys you never amount to anything," and she boots them out of the office. And as they're coming out of the office, there's this great crucifix of Jesus there, and the crucifix, the light pours out of the crucifix, and Jake, tumbling down the stairs out of these old cruddy stairs and this old stairwell, and the light of Jesus looking down on him, and he comes in, the sky opens up like this window, and you hear the sound, and he says, the band, we got to get the band together. And Dan Aykroyd says, "What are you talking about?" Elwood. So they then, in the movie, go about, traveling about, picking up these incredible jazz musicians to put the band back together. And every time the jazz musicians don't want to join the band, and Jake, John Belushi, sometimes taking off his glasses, says, "We're on a mission from God, putting the band back together." So, with that as an entry, that's to some crazy idea is exactly what happens in Jesus' baptism, right? It's almost exactly the same thing. I mean, take away the Blues Brothers part. And so Jesus goes to the Jordan River. And for those of you who've been to the Jordan River, you know this is no fancy place, okay? The Jordan River is an advanced stream. Stan Marsh could fly fish across that thing without even looking, right? This is not a wide river. This is a muddy, dirty, advanced stream that runs back down through Palestine and what is now Israel to the Dead Sea. And when Jesus goes out there, this is no fancy place. This is no fancy place. And he's meeting with a guy who is no fancy guy, right? This is the guy who eats locusts and honey and dressed in uncomfortable clothing, prophet's clothing. And when he ends up in the water, right, the waters of that baptism, he emerges, we're on a mission from God, right? He emerges with a mission from God. This is the turning point in Jesus' life. And he comes out, and of course, it's all part and parcel of out of the waters. In one of the Gospels, it talks about the light that shines, the dove that arrives, depending on which of the stories we hear it in. This is my beloved, my son, with whom I am well pleased. And out of that comes his sense of mission. But his sense of mission it isn't his mission, right? It's Missio Dei. It's the mission of God. Jesus receives the mission of God, and in the most proverbial terms, what is the mission of God? It's to put the band back together again, right? In the most proverbial terms, it is to put humanity back together again in right relationship with God. That is, to put the band back together, that's his calling. And so we're about to baptize Owen in these waters here, and these waters are related to Jesus. These are Jesus waters, right? And when all of us who have done this, and when Owen joins in, we're joining. It's not our ministry, and it's not our mission, and it's not even, it's God's mission, right? It's God's mission to put it all back together again. And so in a little bit, when we get to the baptismal covenant, you're going to see the creed that I believe in, and you'll see it's the Father, and it's the Son, and it's the Holy Spirit. And the believe doesn't quite catch it, because believe is sort of like your mind, but believe, the word in its original was, I live into knowing the truth of God the Father. And then the 5 parts of the covenant that follow. When you say I will with God's help, just take a closer look, because that's the mission of God, and that's your to-do list, to join in with the mission of God. That's what the baptismal covenant is. It's our life mission, joined in with Jesus' mission, joined in with God's mission. It's to put the band back together. So without much ado, let's put Owen in to putting the band back together.